Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Jeremiah. Today we are at chapter 33. And chapter 33 is the second of the set of prophecies that follows chapter 32, both of which were given when Jeremiah was retained as a prisoner. However, the nature of chapter 32 and now chapter 33 has differences, and we shall examine the differences. And these are prophecies directed to the house of Israel and the house of Judah. In chapter 33, verse 1, this word moreover, please take note. This is and then. The word of the Lord came to Jeremiah a second time. A second time means it came again. That is how the Hebrew expresses this. While he was still shut up in the court of the prison. And this is what God is saying. And remember, Jeremiah is the prophet. He has received his prophecies in chapter 32 to go and buy the piece of land that belonged to his uncle. He made the transaction, and then there was a long series of prophecies for him to tell the people, and he had questions as to why buy. Now, in chapter 33, God comes to him once again, and we are told the second time, meaning uh, it was one after the one before. That was one in chapter 32. It says this: Thus says the Lord who made it, the Lord who formed it to establish it, the Lord is his name. Now, all of these in the English language requires us to unpack it a little bit. The first word here, who made it, and then who formed it to establish it, all of these depicts the idea of the creation. God made the world, God formed the man and the woman, and then God established the days. He established the sun, moon, and stars to rule the day and allow them to do all kinds of things. And so we can see this in Genesis chapter 1. Now, in the minds of the people of Israel, the house of Judah and the house of Israel, God continually refer back to Genesis, particularly Genesis chapter 1, because that frames the identity of God as creator. And so he actually physically made something, he squeezed to shape something, and then he appointed and set in motion the laws and the roles of the sun, moon, and stars. And more importantly, here, the Lord is his name, and this is Jehovah. The Lord is actually not the name of God. So please be mindful that the Lord merely is a euphemism. That is Adonai. The Hebrew Adonai is translated as the Lord, and in many of the English translations in capital. It would be fine in the Hebrew when the Jews read these passages and they would replace the name of God with Adonai. But for our purposes today, please be mindful that the name of God is not the Lord, as in the English form, but it is Jehovah, the Yod He Vav He, that would be God's name. And that is how it is established. When we get to verse 3, we find this: call to me, and I will reply you. And then it says, show you great and mighty things which you do not know. Now, again, we need to unpack this because this is in Hebrew. So the first word here is an instruction. It is to call out and to cry out to God. That's Jehovah. And God says that I will respond to you. Now, this is not God doing anything for them, because we have been told in the last number of chapters that the king of Babylon is definitely going to come. God has given the city into his hands. There is no reason to fight the Chaldeans, because whoever fights will die. They will be taken away. The temple will be destroyed, and so will the city of Jerusalem. The land will be desolate, and they will be like that for a long time. Now, in chapter 32, we were told that God says, but nevertheless, I will bring them back. I will gather them back, which tells us that in verse 3 that God is saying, it's not that I'm going to do anything for you, but you can ask me and I will tell you. Now, this word here, show, is not the normal word show. It is cause to make known. Not so much as to show, but God is willing to disclose. Now, why is that the case? Why does God need to disclose? Because God says in his mind, there are great in terms of awesome, great in terms of intensity, great in terms of magnitude. And then it says here, mighty things. This word mighty things really means inaccessible things. Inaccessible things. Well, when it says inaccessible, it means that it is in God's mind. He hasn't revealed them. And these are important things. But if you call to me, call out, shout out to me, God says, I will respond to you. And I will disclose to you, and by you, in this case, great and mighty things which you do not know. Now, you do not know means you do not know them. I think that would be a better way. You do not know them. What is this them? These will be the great and inaccessible things. This will be plural things. And so that's why it's them. And this is by way of knowledge, and that this people would not know because God hasn't disclosed. They have not heard from God. They have not observed it. They have not experienced it. And that's what know is all about. So be mindful that this is spoken to the house of Israel and the house of Judah, to let them know that it is not about delivering them now, because God wouldn't. God has set it in motion that they will be going into exile. In chapter 31, God has told them that they could be there for a long time. Go, settle down, build houses, plant your food, get married, have children. And because and it'll be there for a while. However, in chapter 32, when Jeremiah asked God, why am I buying a piece of land? As an illustration, God says, I will bring them back. Now in chapter 33, God says, I have more that I can tell you, but you need to ask me so that I can answer you. So it's not about doing anything for them, but to let them know what else is going to come in the future of the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Now, when you move on and then you read things like this, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, and this is regarding the houses of this city and the houses of the kings of Judah, which are going to be destroyed, which have been pulled down to fortify against the siege mounds and the sword. They are all getting ready to defend themselves from the Chaldeans. God says this, they will come to fight with the Chaldeans. Who are they? These are the people and the kings of Judah, but only to fill their places with the dead bodies of men, whom I will slay in my anger and my fury. For all of those whose wickedness I have hidden my face from this city. Now, all of these are typical Hebrew speech. In yesterday's passage, in chapter 33, God is turning his face away. So it says here, because of my anger and my fury, that they would even bother to sacrifice their children, the sons and daughters. These are the wickedness. God says, I don't want to look at this place. I have hidden my face. Now, the idea of hidden my face is really to cause my face to not be seen. When God's face is not being seen, that is a very Hebrew phrase that says that God doesn't even want to pay attention to the city. God will not want to be pleased with the city. God doesn't want to show any pleasure on the city. If you recall in Numbers chapter 6, the Aaronic blessing, it's all about God's face. May God's face be lifted up. And all of that describes the picture of the face. And in this case, God doesn't want to show his face. So God is turning his face away from the city, and the city will be suffering calamity. Now, in verse 6, God is now revealing there is hope. Verse 6 says, behold, I will bring it two things, health and healing. Now, first of all, by a literal understanding of health and healing, the first word here is about restoration. And this is about the wound and external. The second word here that is read as healing, and this would be a cure. And this would be for illness, which is internal. Please bear in mind, these two are similar words, but with reference to two slightly nuanced, right? And so God says, I will heal them and reveal to them the abundance of shalom and emet. This is peace and trustworthiness. Not truth itself. Peace will be completeness, meaning no more illness. And so God says, I will heal them of the internals so that it will be permanent. It is an illness that God will rectify. Now, Illness and wounds are all imagery words of what God is inflicting on the house of Israel and the house of Judah. So it's not really a physical healing of a physical illness. And it goes on, and I will cause the captives of Judah and the captives of Israel to return and will rebuild. Now, verse 7 says, and will rebuild those places as at the first. So let's unpack this a little bit. God says, I will cause the return. That's what it means. Cause the return. The subject, the one who leads the return, is God himself, and which we have seen. The gathering of the people will be done by God. And I've mentioned again yesterday, God doesn't say exactly how he's going to do it, but he will. And so when it happens, then you know that the prophecy has been fulfilled. So the idea of return is truth to the original land. And then they were able to build the places, build the land as at the Bereshit, is as the first. All right. The word here is at first. At first, when they moved into the land. Now, this word is the same word as Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. It means it is at the first of the possession of the land. As in Genesis 1:1, it would be at first when the bara activity took place. God says that when he brings them back, the original glory of the land will be there. In verse 8, verse 8 says, God says, I will cleanse them, make them clean from all their avon, that's iniquity or perversity, things that they have done wrong, of their guilt, by way which they have khata against me. And this would be khata. These are two words, right? Two words, which refers to the act of an iniquity, an act of missing, both of which, when they have done iniquity, they are unclean. Their actions are measured. Their actions are measured to see how far they have missed. And hence the word khata, sin against me. The assumption here would be when they come back, they would have repented. This is the same word as return to the land. God will never allow those who are impenitent to come back. So these will be the faithful remnant that will come back. God says, I will cleanse them from all their avon, and which they have khata against me, and then I will pardon. Now, this word pardon is salak. It gives us an idea of send away, and hence the word pardon. So I will send away, I will forgive all your avon. That's this word, the iniquities, avon, by which they have khata. See, it goes hand in hand, by which they have khata. And by which they have pesha against me. What we have here are three very important words that is generally understood as sin. Avon, which is iniquity, perversion, how they have twisted the Torah, what they have done, pretending to be right, but they are wrong. Hata, to show how far off the mark they are. Then we have Pesha. Pesha is how much they reject God. And that would be the picture. All of these three is what actually God judged them on. Avon, Hata, and Pesha. Avon, Hata, and Pesha. And it will do us well that we spend some time to find out exactly how God deals with each of these different perspectives of sins or wrongdoings that God will hold against his people. Now, when they come back and when God cleanses them of all of these things, verse 9, then it shall be to me a name of joy, a praise, and honor before all nations of the land, who shall hear all the good that I do to them. Now, what that means is when they come back, people can know it must be God. Now, like I said, how will that take place? I don't know. But it will be done in a way where all the nations of the earth will hear of all the good that God will do to them, to bring them back to the land, to cleanse them, and to revive them. And all the nations shall fear and tremble for all the goodness and all the prosperity that I provide for them. For it here would be the land. Because when God brings them back, God will make the land good again. Now, again, this will be similar to how it would have been in day one, like the time of David and Solomon. We're then told, thus says the Lord. It says, again there shall be heard in this place, in Jerusalem, of which you say, that's Jeremiah who has said that, it is desolate without man and without beast. This is a description that when Babylon comes, everything will be gone. In the cities of Judah, in the streets of Jerusalem that are desolate, barren, without man and without inhabitant and without beast in the exile. But God says, when he brings them back again, again there shall be heard in this place the voice of joy, the voice of gladness, the voice of the marriages of the bridegroom, of the bride, and the voice of those who will say the praise to God. And so in verse 11, the praise to God comes in this way. It says here, the word here is Yara. Yara is praise. Please bear in mind, Yara is to point to God. Point to. And in a very positive way, it is pointing to the goodness of God, and hence the English word praise. From Yara, we get the word Torah, and that would be pointing to the instructions of what to do. And that's how the Hebrew word works. Yara is to point to God of all his goodness. Torah is the pointing to what God has commanded as instructions. And so this is to point to the Lord of hosts, Jehovah Tzevaot, because the Lord is good. Tov. Remember, Tov is from the eyes of the beholder. And so Tov, from God's eyes, is that he is the one who will do all that he plans and pleases. That's the positive. Then Ra would be evil, and God does do Ra. When it is not pleasing to God, he will still do it, as in punishment, as in calamity, as in the natural disaster, including what is going to happen, that the temple will be destroyed, the people will be in exile, the people will die, the city will be burnt down, and the land will be barren, and that would be Ra. And we read that as calamity. But here God says, when they come back, they shall hear all the good things, and the people shall say, Jehovah is Tov, because his chesed, his chesed goes for olam. Olam merely means for a long time. And also tells us that the land will no longer suffer the barrenness again. And then it says, and of those who were willing, or those who will bring the sacrifice of praise into the house of the Lord. Now, this word, the sacrifice of praise, this praise is todah. It should be thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. And they will be happy that they are back again. And they will come back into the house of the Lord. Now, what does that mean? It means that when there is no more temple, there will be a rebuilding of the temple. And this is for the house of Judah and the house of Israel. Again, it says, because I will cause the captives of the land to shuv as at the first, as at Bereshit, at first. No, the, says the Lord. There's this series of prophecies that is now uttered to Jeremiah. Verse 12, thus says the Lord of hosts. It tells us this, in this place which is desolate, barren, without man and beast, nobody is there, and in all its cities, all destroyed, there shall again be a dwelling place of shepherds causing the flock to lie down. There will be shepherding, there will be peace in the cities of the mountains and the cities of the lowland, cities in the Negev. Verse 13, in the south, in the Negev, in the land of Benjamin, and the places around Jerusalem, in the cities of Yehudah, the flocks, these are the goats and sheep, shall again pass under the hands of those who count them. There is a counter. When times are good, the animals grow and be very populous. They will want to know how many they have. That period of prosperity will be there, says the Lord. We're now told in verse 14, behold, hine, the days are coming. Again, this is about the future. At that time, future. But I will also say that it is also future to us today, says Jehovah. that I will perform that good thing which I have promised to the house of Israel and to the house of Judah. Notice these are promises in context. It is God who is going to do it. It is going to be in the future. It is a good thing, very pleasing to God, that God have said this before, spoken. And it is to the house of Israel and to the house of Judah. Notice God is not saying this to the Egyptians, to the Assyrians, to the Babylonians, or to the Sidonians, the Phoenicians, the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Amorites, or the Edomites. Now, the reason why I point this out to us right now is that these promises here are very specific, and they are given to the house of Israel and to the house of Judah. And these are what we call very hopeful prophecies that when they are in exile, they can still remember that God has promised this to them. So, what does God say? He says, in those days and at that time, that's the days are coming. That's a future time. And then God says, I will cause to arise. And this word here, cause to arise, means cause to show up. And this is with regards to David. Whenever you talk about David, please be mindful that David will represent the monarchy. And so it is a messianic prophecy that it is with regards to David. And it says here, a branch of righteousness, he shall execute judgment and righteousness in the land. This is in the land. And so a branch of righteousness also means a sprout. We've seen this in Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1. This is a sprout. And the character of the sprout here is actually Tzedakah. Tzedakah. This is very, very similar to an earlier prophecy that was spoken, and this was in chapter 23. Very similar in Jeremiah chapter 23. These are all what we call messianic prophecies. And the character is when this branch or the sprout that does righteousness, that does charity, that helps the poor, the needy, and the weak, then he shall execute judgment, which means that he will do things that is just, right? He shall do justice, things that is just, and things that is tzedakah, that will help everyone who is poor and needy in the land. And so the concern of God, even in days to come, is so that everyone benefits from his prophecies, his blessings, his goodness. Not everyone will be rich, but the rich is supposed to take care of the poor. And because of injustice, Hamas, as well as violence that they have done and idolatry that they have done, that is why Babylon is coming to take them all away into exile. The nation, the house of Israel, the house of Judah, both suffer from the same fate because they all did the same things: idolatry, Hamas, injustice, oppressing the poor and needy. And so when the Messianic period comes, it restores the dignity of the poor and needy. It restores the worship of God and no more idolatry. So we look in verse 16, it tells us this: in those days, Judah will be delivered and Jerusalem will dwell safely, meaning nobody will come in those days to disturb them. Obviously, it's not there today because there is a war going on in the southwest of the land of Israel. It is not safe. They are not dwelling safely. But in those days, and at that time, this will happen. And God says that this is the name by which she will be called. By she, it is important to know that this refers to the land. Every time we see that, it is about the land. And the land is going to be called Yehovah Tzidkenu. This is the word. Yehovah Tzidkenu. And what it means is, Nu here would be your, and then Sedek is justice, righteousness, right? Your righteousness. And so this is the translation, Yehovah. Then this one would be Sitkenu. And I think at this point in time, we will understand that this is the character of the land, that in this land there will be righteousness. The poor, the needy will be taken care of. There will be justice, that everything will demonstrate the character of God, that He is just. And this is what we call messianic. And so, how will the house of Judah and the house of Israel know? First, they will have to come back, and then the land will be repopulated. There will be joy, there will be praise to God, thanksgiving. The temple will be rebuilt, and there will be a branch, a sprout that will come out. The Messiah will then rule the land as the king. And so, in those days, there will be peace. Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 to 4. Verse 17. For thus says the Lord. And this is a reminder that when they go into exile, when people say, what happened to the land? And they mock the land, it is because they have really betrayed God through idolatry, through oppression, through Hamas, through injustice and lack of righteousness. And then what happens is then there will be no king, no temple, no priest, no Levite, and of course, no people. All of them will be in exile. And so God says, in those days that comes, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel. Now, what this means is that David refers to the monarchy. In 2 Samuel 7, we are told that the throne of David will be forever, for a long, long time. There will never lack a man because the king is a man, and he will sit on the throne of the house of Israel. There will always be a king. So never lack means never cut off. As of when Babylon comes, the kings will be cut off. So they will lack a man. Zedekiah would be the last. What is important then for us to understand is that there will be a man that will come back somehow from the sprout of Jesse, uh, for the namesake of David. There will be a king and a man. Nor shall there be any lack of priests, Levites, lacking a man to offer burnt offerings before me. So this is another man. The priests and Levites is also a man to do these temple services. We are also told to kindle grain offerings and to sacrifice continually. So this is telling us that in the days to come, there will always be a king. There will always be priests. There will always be Levites. All of these are important because the king comes from the tribe of Judah, from the lineage of David. The Levites come from the tribe that God set aside instead of the firstborn. And from the Levites, the descendants of Aaron becomes the priest. Now, all of these testify of God. Why? Because they are the ones who will lead the nation, demonstrate to the people and the people around them that God is with them. In verse 19 is an and then, a continuation. The word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, and it's audible, saying, "Thus says the Lord." And this is very similar to chapter 31. So you should go back and compare Jeremiah chapter 31. Now, what does God say? He says this, if, all right, if, and these are all hypotheticals. If you can break my covenant with the day and my covenant with the night, and so it says this, if you can actually try to make it of no purpose, if you can frustrate, make of no value the covenant of God, and if you use the day and the night, so the day would be Yom, and if you use Lila, and we see this in Genesis chapter 1, God gave the name to the bright part Yom, to the dark part Lila. And so God says, if you could use the day and the night to frustrate my covenant, so that there will be no day and night in their seasons. Can you stop the day and stop the night? Then God says, if you can do that, then my covenant may be frustrated with David, my servant, so that he shall not have a son to reign on his throne, and with the Levites, the priests, my ministers. This is like coming to challenge anyone. If the covenant of God can be frustrated by the day and by the night, then God will break the covenant. And what does that mean? It means that it will not be broken. God is going to renew the covenant in the hearts of the house of Judah and the house of David, and there will always be a son, always, on the throne of David. The reason why people think that there is none is because by the time Zedekiah is over, there is no more because Zedekiah has no sons. And then when you talk about uh, Jeconiah, Jeconiah was told by God in Jeremiah chapter 22 that he would not have a son that sits on the throne. And so what's going to happen is God is saying, well, in God's mind, it is not going to end. God will make sure that David will have a son. That in 2 Samuel chapter 7, his promise that the reign on the throne will continue forever will be there. There will be Levites, there will be Kohen. They are the ministers, which means that even in the exile, the Levites and the priests, they all know their roles and they continue to play their role, even though there is no temple. Verse 22, it says, as the host of heaven cannot be numbered, nor the sand of the sea be measured. Now, what does that mean? It means that these are uncountable, large number. And so the host of heaven will be the stars, and the sand of the sea would be the grains. And so understand that it is usually used as a reference to the large numbers of the children of Israel, that the descendants of Abraham will be like the stars in the sky and will be like the sand on the shore. And so God continues to say this. And so I will multiply the descendants of David, my servant, and the Levites who minister to me. God can do that with the children of Israel. God will do it with the descendants of David. So there will always be kings. And there will always be ministers or Levites. Verse 23, moreover, verse 23 says, and then the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah one more time. There are different segments. And this is asked of Jeremiah. Have you not considered what these people have spoken, saying, the two families which the Lord has chosen, he has also cast them off? Now, there is a little ambiguity here. The two families, what are they? House of Judah, house of Israel. And that's one way of looking at this, the two families. There is also another aspect, which is the son of David and the Levites and Kohen. But I would think it's more likely to refer to the two houses, the two families, that God has cast them off because they think that when Babylon comes, that's all. The Syrians came, the northern kingdom is gone. Babylon is surrounding, laying siege to the city. They will be gone too. And so they are thinking God is going to cast them off. God is going to disregard them. Is that what's going to happen? Well, these people, thus they have despised my people as if they should be no more a nation before them. Now, what is happening is that these people before them, these are the people looking at Israel, saying that, well, they are going to be gone, extinct. Would that be the case? God says no. God says, thus says the Lord. Again, God uses his expression. If my covenant is not with day and night, and if I have not appointed the ordinances of heaven and earth, these are the natural laws that God has put in place. God says, if his covenant with day and night and heaven and earth and all everything is going back to Genesis 1, by the way, that God has set this in motion. Will it ever go away? Of course not. If it goes away, then I will cast away the descendants of Jacob and David, my servant, so that I will not take any of his descendants to be rulers over the descendants of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. God is saying, if it's true, yes, there will be no more Israel. There will be no more house of Judah and house of Israel. But God says, no. All these things with the day and night, with heaven and earth, it will not go away. God has placed the laws in place. The things in the heavens are all natural laws. It will not go away. And therefore, God will not cast away the descendants of Jacob and the descendants of David, my servant. And this would be Israel and Judah. And so God says, no, they will always be there because this is not true. And in conclusion, God says this: for I will cause their captives to return and have mercy, racham, on them. This is God's promise. There will be a return so that people cannot say that the children of Israel is already gone and extinct. And God will have mercy, will have compassion. And this idea of compassion is the idea of a womb. That God will care for them like a mother to her child in the womb. That would be totally a complete commitment to them. And that is because when they are eventually brought back into the land, God will renew the covenant with them to be placed onto their hearts, their minds, their wills, that they will no longer need to be taught the Torah, but they will know it very well inside of them to make good decisions so that God will forgive them and God will have compassion on them and God will bring them back to the land. Now, these are all prophecies of hope. And with this, God says, call to me. I will reveal to you more and more things that you don't know, but I know. God has plans still for the house of Judah and the house of Israel. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.